My husband sold me at a charity auction for $1. One single dollar. That's what 15 years of devotion, countless sleepless nights, and my entire brilliance was worth to him. But then, a man I'd never met stood up from the shadows and bid $100,000. That moment. That was the night my life split in two. My name is Alina Winters, and this is the story of how I became my own savior. The grand ballroom of the Ashford Hotel in downtown Portland, Oregon shimmered with false light that autumn evening. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen tears above heads full of ambition and champagne promises. I sat at table 12, wrapped in a dress the color of deep wine, chosen not by me, but by Marcus. My husband, the man who had built his empire on the foundation of my invisible labor. Marcus Winters. Even his name tasted like metal in my mouth now. To everyone else, he was the golden boy of Pinnacle Investment Group, the youngest senior partner in the firm's history, a financial wizard whose quarterly forecasts never missed. But I knew the truth. Every brilliant presentation, every award-winning analysis, every standing ovation he received, all of it had passed through my hands first, like water through a sieve, leaving him the gold and me the dust. 15 years. 15 years I had given him not just my work, but my voice, my dreams, my very identity. I still remember the night we met at Stanford Business School. I was the scholarship student with more degrees than dresses, and he was the charismatic heir to a banking legacy with more confidence than competence. We fell in love the way young, ambitious people do, drunk on possibility and mutual admiration. Back then, he genuinely seemed to see me, to value my mind, to celebrate my talent, but somewhere between graduation and our wedding, between his first promotion and our 5th anniversary, something shifted. Or maybe it had always been there, and I'd simply been too blinded by love to notice. The requests started small. Honey, could you just look over this presentation? Then they grew. I need your input on this merger analysis. Till finally, there was no pretense left. Alina, I need the Henderson portfolio projections by tomorrow morning. The board meeting is at 9. I did it. Every single time. Because I told myself we were a team. Because I believed his success was our success. Because my own father, a perpetually overlooked adjunct professor at a community college in rural Idaho, had whispered in my ear since childhood, Alina, brilliance without visibility is just isolation. Let someone else take the spotlight if it means security for you both. So I became Marcus's ghost, his invisible engine, the mind behind the throne. But tonight was different. Tonight I felt something break inside me, like the final thread of a rope frayed beyond repair. It started this morning, actually, when I found myself standing in our walk-in closet, staring at the wine-colored dress Marcus had laid out for me. Not asked. Laid out, like I was a doll to be dressed for his performance. Wear this tonight, he'd said casually over his espresso, not even looking up from his phone. It photographs well? Understated. You'll blend perfectly. Blend. That word had echoed in my skull all day. Now, sitting at this table while Marcus worked the room like a seasoned politician, I watched him through new eyes. He moved from cluster to cluster of Portland's elite, his laughter too loud, his handshakes too firm, his compliments too rehearsed. I saw the calculation behind every gesture, the way he positioned himself, always in the center, always in the light. And I saw something else, too. The way other women looked at him with interest, and the way he preened under their attention. The way other men clapped his shoulder with admiration. And the way he soaked it up like rain on parched earth. My husband was a performer, and I was his stage crew, invisible in the darkness, making sure every light hit him perfectly. Alina. A voice pulled me from my thoughts. It was Rebecca Chen, Marcus's colleague and one of the few people at Pinnacle who'd ever acknowledged my existence. She slid into the seat beside me, her expression concerned. You look like you're a million miles away. It's tired, I said automatically. The lie as familiar as breathing. Rebecca studied me with those sharp, knowing eyes of hers. The Henderson merger is closing next week. I assume Marcus has been burning the midnight oil. I almost laughed. Marcus hadn't touched the Henderson file in weeks. That was all me. 300 hours of analysis, risk assessment, and financial modeling, all signed with his name. Something like that? I murmured. Rebecca opened her mouth to say something else, but the lights dimmed and the auctioneer took the stage. The charity auction was beginning. This annual event raised money for underprivileged youth in the Portland area. And Pinnacle Investment Group was the primary sponsor. It was also Marcus's favorite night of the year, a chance to be seen being generous. The auction moved through its items. A week at a beach house in Cannon Beach, a private wine tour through Willamette Valley, a dinner prepared by a celebrity chef. Marcus bid aggressively on several items, each time making sure everyone saw his paddle go up, saw his winning smile, saw his largesse, and then, without warning, he stood up. My stomach dropped. I knew that look on his face. That particular combination of smugness and mischief that meant he was about to do something he thought was clever. No, please. No, but he was already moving toward the stage, already taking the microphone from the auctioneer's hand with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his life. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus's voice boomed through the speakers. I have a special lot to add to tonight's auction. Something truly unique. The room quieted. All eyes turned to him. He was glowing absolutely radiant under the spotlight. And then he pointed directly at me. I'm offering dinner with my lovely wife. Alina, now I know what you're thinking. Who wants to spend an evening with someone who will probably just talk about macroeconomic theory and fiscal policy all night? A ripple of laughter. My face burned. But hey, Marcus continued, his grin widening. She makes a mean spreadsheet, and I guarantee she'll have your quarterly projections done before dessert. More laughter. Louder this time. I felt every eye in that ballroom turn toward me. And in those gazes, I saw everything I'd feared. Pity, amusement, secondhand embarrassment, and worst of all, agreement. They all saw me exactly as Marcus did. A boring wife. A calculator with legs. A convenient tool. So let's start the bidding, Marcus announced, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm. And because I'm a generous man, we'll start at just $1. Who wants to bid $1 for an evening with my brilliant, number-crunching, absolutely riveting wife? The laughter swelled into a roar. And somewhere in that sound, in that wave of mockery washing over me, something inside me didn't just break. It shattered completely, irreversibly. I sat frozen in my wine-colored dress, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The room spun, and all I could hear was laughter, laughter, laughter. And Marcus's voice riding above it all, victorious and cruel. This was it. This was the moment 15 years of silent sacrifice had led to. Public humiliation. A joke. A $1 valuation of everything I was. I closed my eyes and made a decision. When I opened them again, I would no longer be Alina Winters, the invisible wife. I would be something else entirely, and then, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk, a voice rang out from the back of the ballroom. $100,000. The laughter died instantly. The silence that replaced it was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat, thundering in my ears like a war drum. Every head in the grand ballroom turned toward the source of that voice, and I turned to. My breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat. A man stood in the shadows near the back exit, tall and still, dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. As he began walking forward, the crowd parted like a sea, and I finally saw his face. Sharp features, steel gray hair, eyes that held the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself. I had never seen him before in my life, and yet, somehow, he was walking toward me like he'd been waiting for this exact moment for years. $100,000, he repeated, his voice carrying effortlessly through the stunned silence. For dinner with Mrs. Winters, and I don't expect any spreadsheets." Someone gasped. Rebecca gripped my arm. And on the stage, Marcus stood frozen, the microphone hanging limp in his hand, his expression cycling through confusion, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. The man reached my table and extended his hand to me. Up close, I could see the faint lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair, the absolute certainty in his gaze. "Dr. Nathan Cross," he said simply. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, Mrs. Winters, but it seemed the situation called for it. Would you do me the honor?" I stared at his outstretched hand. This was insane. This man was a complete stranger. This was a charity auction gone completely off the rails. Every logical, cautious instinct the first possessed was screaming at me to politely decline, smooth this over, to minimize the scene. But I'd spent 15 years being logical and cautious, 15 years minimizing myself. So instead, I placed my hand in his. His grip was warm and steady, and when he helped me to my feet, I felt something shift in the room's energy. Or maybe it was just inside me. "Mr. Winters," Dr. Cross said, finally acknowledging Marcus, who still stood on stage looking like he'd been struck by lightning. "I believe the auction rules state that the highest bid wins. Consider my check written. The youth programs of Portland thank you for your generous contribution to this evening's cause." With that, he gently guided me toward the exit, and I went. I went because staying felt like drowning. I went because his hand on my arm felt like the first solid thing I'd touched in years. I went because every cell in my body was screaming that this moment was the beginning of something I'd been waiting for without even knowing it. Behind us, the ballroom exploded into frenzied whispers. But I didn't look back. Not at Marcus, not at Rebecca, not at any of them. I just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, toward the door and whatever waited beyond it. We emerged into the cool October night. And I took my first full breath in what felt like hours. The air smelled of rain and fallen leaves and possibility. "My car is just here," Dr. Cross said, gesturing toward a sleek black sedan. "I understand this is highly irregular, Mrs. Winters, so let me be direct. I'm not a stranger. Not really. 3 weeks ago, you sent me something. Do you remember?" I froze. 3 weeks ago. In a moment of desperate, reckless hope, I had compiled every major analysis, every strategic report, every financial model I'd created for Marcus over the past 5 years. I'd packaged it all into a portfolio and sent it to exactly one person, Dr. Nathan Cross, the most respected executive recruiter in the Pacific Northwest, known for discovering and placing top-tier financial talent. I'd done it in a fugue state at 3 a.m, after Marcus had taken credit for my Henderson merger analysis at a board meeting while I sat in the audience. Unacknowledged, as always. I'd done it without any real expectation of a response. Just a message in a bottle thrown into the void. "You got it." My voice came out as barely a whisper. "I got it," he confirmed, and there was something almost like anger in his tone. Righteous anger. And Mrs. Winters, in 25 years of executive recruitment, I have never, and I mean never, seen analytical work of that caliber. The Henderson merger strategy alone was a masterpiece. The pharmaceutical sector risk assessment was revolutionary. And when I cross-referenced the timestamps on your work with the dates of your husband's public presentations, he shook his head. "Well, let's just say I made it my business to attend tonight's gala. Why?" The question burst out of me. Why would you do that? Why would you care? He looked at me directly, and in his eyes I saw something I'd almost forgotten existed. Respect. Pure, uncomplicated professional respect. It's because talent like yours doesn't deserve to be buried. Mrs. Winters, because watching a mediocre man take credit for an exceptional woman's work makes my blood boil. And because 3 weeks ago you reached out for help. Tonight, I'm answering that call. Tears stung my eyes. I blinked them back furiously. "I have a proposition for you," Dr. Cross continued. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at my office downtown. I represent several firms who would be very, very interested in your skills. One in particular, Redwood Capital Partners. It's launching a new investment division, and they need someone to build it from the ground up. They need a chief strategist. They need you. The salary is triple what I suspect you've never been paid at Pinnacle. Full equity stake. Your name on every report. Your face at every presentation. I don't understand, I said, even though part of me understood perfectly. This is too much. Too fast. I'm married. I have obligations. You have a choice. Dr. Cross interrupted gently. Tomorrow morning, 9A.M. The only question is whether you're ready to stop being someone's ghost and start being yourself. He handed me a business card, then opened his car door. I'll have a car pick you up from wherever you'd like if you decide to come. No pressure. No strings. Just an opportunity. What you do with it is entirely up to you. I stood on the sidewalk, clutching his card, watching his taillights disappear into the Portland night. Behind me, through the hotel's glass doors, I could see the gala still in full chaos. I could see Marcus storming off the stage, could see people huddled in gossiping clusters, could see my entire carefully constructed life imploding in real dash time, and all I felt was relief. Clean, pure, overwhelming relief. I pulled out my phone. I had 17 missed calls from Marcus. I ignored every single one and instead called an Uber to take me to my old friend Sarah's house in the Alberta Arts District, where I knew I could spend the night without questions. As the car pulled up and I slid into the back seat, I looked down at Dr. Cross's business card. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. a choice. For the first time in 15 years, I was going to choose myself. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My entire world had just been turned inside out, and I lay on Sarah's guest bed staring at the ceiling, watching car headlights sweep across the walls, and listening to the distant sound of the city breathing. Sarah had taken one look at my face when I arrived and immediately poured us both wine. She didn't press for details, just sat with me on her worn leather couch while I told her everything. About Marcus. About the years of invisible work. About tonight's humiliation. About Dr. Nathan Cross and his impossible offer. So, what are you going to do? She asked, finally refilling my glass. I don't know, I whispered. This is crazy, right? You don't just walk away from 15 years of marriage because of one bad night. Sarah fixed me with a look. Alina, sweetheart, this wasn't one bad night. This was 15 years of bad nights, and tonight was just the first time everyone else could see it. She was right. God, she was right. And somewhere deep in my bones, I'd known it for years. I'd just been too afraid, too conditioned, too convinced that my worth was tied to Marcus's success to admit it. What if I fail? I asked, what if I'm not as good as Dr. Cross thinks? What if I've been coasting on Marcus's reputation all this time? Are you kidding me? Sarah's voice rose with indignation. Alina, you are the reputation. You did the work. All of it. Marcus just stood in front of PowerPoints and smiled pretty. You don't need him. You never did. He needed you. At 1 a.m., I finally checked my phone. 43 missed calls from Marcus. Dozens of text messages that devolved from angry to pleading to angry again. I read through them with a strange detachment, like I was observing someone else's life. The final message, sent at 12:47 a.m., simply read, "We need to talk. Tomorrow, this is ridiculous." Come home, I turned off my phone at 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep and took a shower. Sarah loaned me clothes since all I had was last night's wine-colored dress, and I absolutely refused to wear it again. I chose simple black slacks and a cream blouse, pulled my hair back, stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was tired, but she was also awake, maybe for the first time in 15 years. You're really doing this? I said to my reflection. It wasn't a question at 8:30. I was sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Dr. Cross's office, nursing a latte I couldn't taste, when my phone buzzed. I turned it back on to call the car service Dr. Cross had offered. And immediately Marcus's messages started flooding in. But this one wasn't from Marcus. It was from Rebecca Chen. Alina, I don't know where you are, but you need to know. Marcus is losing his mind. He's at the office tearing through files looking for the Henderson documents. I think he's starting to realize how much you actually did. Be careful. And for what it's worth, what happened last night was unconscionable. You deserved better. You deserve better. I stared at that message for a long moment, then typed back, thank you. I'm okay. And Rebecca. I'm done settling for less than I deserve. It's at exactly 9 a.m. I walked into the offices of Cross Executive Placement on the 23rd floor of the Liberty Tower in downtown Portland. The reception area was all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the Willamette River. And sitting in one of the modern chairs was Dr. Nathan Cross. Looking as composed as he had last night, he stood when he saw me. And something that might have been relief crossed his face. Mrs. Winters, I wasn't sure you'd come. Alina, I said, please. And I almost didn't. But you did? That takes courage. Come, there's someone I'd like you to meet. He led me through the office to a conference room where a woman in her early 50s sat reviewing documents. She had short silver hair, sharp eyes behind designer glasses, and an air of absolute command. Lena Winters, Dr. Cross said, meet Victoria Brennan, CEO of Redwood Capital Partners. Victoria stood and extended her hand, her grip firm and assured. Ms. Winters, I've read your work. All of it. Remarkable doesn't begin to cover it. I'll be direct because I suspect you appreciate directness. I want you to build and lead the strategic investment division at Redwood. Full autonomy. Your team, your vision, your name on the door. The compensation package is here. She slid a folder across the table. I opened it and had to fight to keep my expression neutral. The base salary alone was $280,000. More than triple what I'd never been officially paid at Pinnacle, where I'd been classified as Marcus's executive assistant despite doing the work of a senior analyst. There was also an equity stake, comprehensive benefits, and performance bonuses that could push my total compensation well over $400,000. This is contingent on one thing, Victoria continued. I need to know you're all in. I need to know you're ready to step into the spotlight, to put your name on your analysis, to present to boards and investors yourself. Dr. Cross showed me your technical work, and it's exceptional. But I need to know you can be the face of that work too. I thought about Marcus on that stage last night, about his ease with performance, his comfort with attention. And I thought about all the times I'd told myself I was fine in the shadows, that I preferred anonymity, that I wasn't good at public speaking anyway. But that had been fear talking. Fear dressed up as preference. I can do it, I said, and my voice was steady. I want to do it. Victoria smiled. Then welcome to Redwood, Alina. When can you start? Monday, I said without hesitation. I'll submit my resignation to Pinnacle this morning. Dr. Cross raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? You might want to take some time too, I'm sure, I interrupted. In fact, I'd like to go there right now, if you don't mind. There's something I need to do. An hour later, I walked into the offices of Pinnacle Investment Group for what I knew would be the last time. The familiar space, the glass walls, the muted gray carpeting, the motivational quotes about excellence and integrity that meant nothing felt alien now, like I was visiting a place I'd left years ago. I went straight to Human Resources, where Jennifer Park, the HR director, looked up in surprise. Elena, we weren't expecting you today. Marcus has been looking everywhere for you. He said, I'm here to submit my resignation, I said calmly, placing the letter I'd written at Sarah's dining table at 3 a.m. on her desk, effective immediately. I'm waiving the standard 2-week notice period. Jennifer's eyes widened. Alina, you can't just talk. Have you talked to Marcus about this? The Henderson closing is next week, and Marcus will handle it himself, I finished, as he's been claiming to do all along. I'm sure he'll be fine. I turned to leave, but Jennifer called after me. Alina, wait. I need to process some paperwork. And Marcus really should be no, I said simply. Turning back, Marcus doesn't get a say in this. Jennifer, I've already made my decision. I'll be clearing out my desk now. The desk in question was tucked in the corner of Marcus's office, a small workspace that had somehow become my permanent station, despite having no official title beyond executive assistant. Over the years, it had accumulated my books, my files, my coffee mug, the small succulent plant that had somehow served despite the office's terrible lighting. I was packing the succulent when Marcus stormed in. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I didn't flinch, didn't turn around. Just carefully wrapped the plant in newspaper and placed it in my box. "I'm leaving, Marcus." I thought that would be obvious. "Leaving?" His voice climbed. "You can't leave. The Henderson deal closes in 5 days, Alina. 5 days. I need the analysis." I turned to face him now. "The projections. The risk assessments. Yes, I'm sure you do need those. Unfortunately, all my work is password protected on my personal hard drive, which is coming with me. You'll have to figure it out yourself." His face went red, then white. "You can't do this. We're married, for God's sake. We're supposed to be a team. What about loyalty? What about respect?" My voice was quiet but cut like glass. "What about credit? What about basic human decency? You sold me for $1 last night, Marcus. You made me a joke in front of everyone we know. So, no, I don't think I owe you loyalty anymore." "It was a joke," he sputtered. "Alina, come on. You know I didn't mean yes." "You did," I interrupted. "You absolutely meant it. That's what makes it so perfect. For once in 15 years, you told the truth about how you see me. And I'm grateful for it, actually, because it finally made me see the truth, too." I picked up my box. "Goodbye, Marcus. I'll have a lawyer contact you about divorce proceedings." Divorce. He looked genuinely shocked, as if this possibility had never occurred to him. "Alina, you can't be serious. One bad joke and you're throwing away our entire marriage." I paused at the door and looked back at him one last time. "Wasn't one joke, Marcus. It was 15 years of taking credit for my work. 15 years of dismissing my dreams. 15 years of making me feel like I should be grateful for the privilege of being your invisible support system. Last night, you didn't ruin our marriage. You just finally showed everyone else what it actually was." I walked out, and this time I didn't look back. The next 2 weeks were a blur of endings and beginnings. I moved into a small furnished apartment in the Pearl District. All hardwood floors and exposed brick and windows that actually let in light. It was temporary until I found something permanent. But it felt more like home than the house in West Hills ever had. The divorce papers were filed. Marcus contested nothing, probably because his lawyer had explained exactly how bad it would look if he fought me, especially after word of the auction incident had spread through Portland's business community like wildfire. I asked for nothing except my personal belongings and my share of our joint accounts. I didn't want his money. I wanted my freedom. My first day at Redwood Capital Partners felt surreal. I had my own office with my name on the door, Alina Winters, Chief Strategist. Investment Division. Victoria introduced me to my team. 3 sharp analysts who looked at me with genuine interest and respect. Not as someone's appendage, but as their leader. "Okay?" I said at our first meeting, looking at their expectant faces. "Here's how this is going to work. I don't believe in silent martyrdom or invisible labor. If you do the work, your name goes on it. We succeed together or we fail together, but everyone gets credit for their contributions." "Clear." They exchanged glances, then nodded. One of them, a young woman named Amy Chen, raised her hand tentatively. "Can I just say, we've all followed your work for years. The Henderson merger analysis. The pharmaceutical sector forecast. That was incredible. It's an honor to work with you." "My work?" I echoed, surprised. "How did you know it was mine?" Marcus presented all of that. Amy looked uncomfortable. "I mean, we didn't know for sure, but people talk." Everyone knew Marcus Winters had an exceptional analyst behind him. And when Dr. Cross started shopping your portfolio around, it all clicked into place. So it hadn't been as invisible as I'd thought. People had known or suspected. They just never said anything because that's how these things work. The silent complicity of organizations that benefit from exploiting invisible labor. Well, not anymore. Meanwhile, Marcus was discovering exactly how much he'd relied on me. Word filtered back through Rebecca, who'd become an unlikely ally. The Henderson merger was a disaster. Marcus had tried to wing it with the existing documents. But when the clients pushed back with technical questions, he'd floundered. The deal had ultimately closed, but at terms far less favorable than my analysis had projected. Pinnacle's leadership was not pleased. It's been working 16-hour days trying to catch up, Rebecca told me over coffee one Saturday morning. But Alina, he just doesn't have your mind for this stuff. Yesterday, he presented a risk assessment that apparently contradicted itself 3 times in the first 5 pages. The managing partners are starting to ask questions about his previous work. I felt nothing hearing this. No satisfaction. No guilt. Just a vague sense of watching something that had been inevitable finally play out. That's not my problem anymore, I said simply. I know, Rebecca replied, and I'm glad. You look different, Alina. Lighter. Like you're finally breathing. She was right. I was breathing. For the first time in 15 years. I could take a full breath without feeling like I was somehow betraying Marcus by existing too loudly. My first major project at Redwood was analyzing a potential acquisition in the agricultural technology sector. It was complex, risky, and exactly the kind of challenge I'd always loved. I threw myself into it, working late nights in my new office, but this time the work felt different. It was mine. My analysis. My name. My presentation to the board. The night before that presentation, Victoria stopped by my office. Nervous, she asked, leaning against the doorframe. Terrified, I admitted. I've done this work for years, but I've never actually presented it myself. You'll be brilliant, Victoria said with certainty. You know this material backwards and forwards. Just remember, they're not doing you a favor by listening. You're doing them a favor by sharing your expertise. Own that. The next day, standing in Redwood's sleek conference room in front of the board of directors, I felt my heart hammering. But then I opened my presentation, looked at the first slide with my name on it, Agricultural Technology Sector Analysis by Alina Winters, Chief Strategist, and something settled inside me. This was mine. I'd earned this. And I was not going to diminish myself anymore. I presented for 45 minutes, fielding questions with confidence, defending my conclusions with evidence, and when I finished, the room erupted in approval. It's outstanding work. Ms. Winters, the board chairman said, truly exceptional. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need. Approved unanimously. Walking out of that room, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Pride. Pure, uncomplicated pride in work that bore my name and no one else's. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. I heard your presentation was spectacular. Congratulations on your first victory of many. Nathan Cross, I smiled and typed back. Thank you for everything. You saved my life. His response came quickly. No, Alina, you saved your own life. I just held the door open. But of course, the story wasn't over. Because the thing about burning down your old life is that people notice. And in Portland's tight-knit business community, my departure from Pinnacle and arrival at Redwood had been noticed by everyone, including Pinnacle's 2 most important clients. The ones Marcus had been desperate to keep, Cascade Agricultural Holdings and Pacific Heartland Farms. Both companies were looking to expand their operations, and both had been frustrated with Pinnacle's slow, bureaucratic approach to their unique needs. They wanted innovative financing solutions, strategic growth plans tailored to agricultural sector specifics, and most importantly, they wanted to work with someone who actually understood their business, someone, it turned out, who'd been analyzing their sector for years, someone whose previous work they'd seen, even if they hadn't known her name at the time. Victoria called me into her office on a Tuesday morning. 3 weeks into my tenure at Redwood. She was smiling in a way that made me nervous. "Elena, I just got off the phone with Gerald Morrison, CEO of Cascade Agricultural. He specifically requested a meeting with you. Apparently, word has gotten around about your agricultural technology analysis, and he's very interested in exploring whether Redwood might be a better fit for Cascade's expansion plans than their current partnership with Pinnacle." My stomach dropped. "Victoria, I can't. That would be directly targeting Marcus's clients. It would look like revenge, would it?" Victoria's expression was unreadable. "Or would it be two companies making a smart business decision to work with the best analyst in the sector? Elena, you don't owe Marcus Winters anything. And more importantly, Cascade and Pacific Heartland don't owe him anything either. If they're unhappy with his service and want to explore other options, that's just business." She was right. I knew she was right. But it still felt dangerous, like I was crossing some invisible line. "Think about it," Victoria said. "But think fast. Morrison wants to meet next week." I thought about it. I thought about Marcus's dismissive laugh when I'd suggested Pinnacle develop specialized agriculture sector services. I thought about all the times I'd begged him to pay attention to these client-specific needs, only to be told I was overcomplicating things. I thought about his face on that stage selling me for $1. "Set up the meeting," I told Victoria. "If they're looking for better service, they deserve to know what Redwood can offer." The meeting with Gerald Morrison was scheduled for the following Tuesday. But before that happened, something else occurred that changed everything. Marcus showed up at my apartment. "Your work." I laughed, and the sound came out sharp and bitter. "Marcus, every single report you've ever presented had my fingerprints all over it. The Henderson merger. Mine. The pharmaceutical forecasts. Mine. Those agriculture sector analyses that Cascade and Pacific Heartland actually valued. Oh my." You just stood in front of rooms and smiled. "That's not fair," he said, but his voice had lost its conviction. "I brought in the clients. I maintained the relationships. You performed, I finished. And you're very good at performing, Marcus. But performance isn't the same as substance. And now that I'm gone, everyone can see the difference." He sank onto my couch uninvited, putting his head in his hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. "Almost. Drowning, Elena," he said quietly. "The partners are questioning everything. Morrison from Cascade called me yesterday and basically said they're exploring other options. Pacific Heartland won't return my calls. And the worst part is, I don't even know how to fix it because I never actually understood how you did what you did." There it was. The admission I'd waited 15 years to hear. And now that it had finally come, I felt nothing. No triumph. No vindication. Just a vast, empty relief that I was no longer responsible for saving him from his own inadequacy. "That's not my problem anymore," I said gently. "You made sure of that when you sold me for $1 in front of everyone we know." "I was drunk," he protested weakly. I was showing off. "I didn't think you never think, Marcus. That was always the problem. You never thought about how your actions affected me. You never thought about what I sacrificed. You never thought about what would happen if I finally decided I'd had enough." He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Is there any chance at all that we could work this out? I'll go to counseling. I'll give you credit. I'll change." I studied his face, this man I'd loved for 15 years, and tried to find some remnant of feeling. But there was nothing there. The humiliation at the gala hadn't killed my love for him. It had just finally made me acknowledge what I'd known deep down for years, that there was nothing left to kill. "No," I said simply, "there's no chance. Because even now, Marcus, even sitting here begging me to come back, you're not actually sorry about what you did to me. You're sorry about what my leaving did to you. And that's the difference between us." He stood slowly like an old man and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. "I really did love you once," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. "But love without respect is just a beautiful prison. and I'm done being imprisoned." He left, and I sat in my small apartment surrounded by the humble beginnings of my new life, and felt the final thread connecting me to my old existence. Snapped cleanly in two. The meeting with Gerald Morrison happened the following Tuesday. He was a weathered man in his 60s, with calloused hands and sharp eyes that had clearly seen through a lot of nonsense in his time. "Ms. Winters," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "I'll be honest with you. I've been working with Pinnacle for 8 years, and for the last 3 of those years, something changed. The analysis got sharper. The recommendations got smarter. The whole approach became more sophisticated. And then 3 weeks ago, that all vanished overnight. Now I know why." I said nothing, just waited. I'm a farmer, Ms. Winters. 4th generation. And farmers recognize quality work when they see it, even if we can't always articulate why it's quality. Your agriculture sector analysis. That wasn't just good financial modeling. That showed real understanding of our business, our challenges, our opportunities. That's what we need. Not some slick guy in an expensive suit telling us what we want to hear. "Mr. Morrison," I said carefully, "I want to be clear. I'm not here to badmouth my former employer or to steal clients. I'm here because Victoria Brennan told me you requested this meeting. If you're happy with Pinnacle's service, then I'm not happy," he interrupted. "Haven't been for months. Your husband or ex-husband, whatever he is now, he never listened. We'd tell him our concerns, our plans, and he'd smile and nod and then present us with generic solutions that had nothing to do with what we'd actually said. But those reports you wrote, those actually hurt us." He leaned forward. "So here's what I'm proposing. Cascade is planning a major expansion into organic produce and sustainable farming technology. It's a $100 million initiative over 5 years. We need a financial partner who understands both the investment side and the agricultural reality. Can Redwood handle that?" I felt my heart rate spike. This wasn't just business. This was the kind of project that could make or break a new division. But I'd spent 12 years being brilliant in the shadows. I knew I could do this. "Yes," I said firmly. "We can absolutely handle that. Give me 2 weeks. And I'll present you with a comprehensive strategy that addresses every aspect of your expansion. From capital structure to risk management to long-term growth projections." Morrison smiled. "That's what I wanted to hear. I'll tell you right now, Ms. Winters, if your presentation is half as good as your previous work, you've got the account. And I suspect Thomas Chen over at Pacific Heartland is going to want to have a similar conversation." He stood to leave, then paused. "One more thing. What your ex-husband did at that charity gala, that was disgraceful. You deserved better. I'm glad you found it." After he left, I sat alone in the conference room for a long moment, letting the magnitude of what had just happened sink in. If I landed Cascade and Pacific Heartland, that would represent almost a third of Pinnacle's agricultural portfolio. The firm would survive, but Marcus's division would be gutted. Was this revenge? Or was it just the natural consequence of years of incompetence finally catching up to someone who'd been coasting on stolen brilliance? I decided it didn't matter. This wasn't about Marcus anymore. This was about me finally claiming the career I'd earned. I spent the next 2 weeks living at my desk, not because anyone forced me to, but because for the first time in my professional life, I was working on something that would bear my name. My analysis. My strategy. My reputation on the line. My team at Redwood rose to the challenge beautifully. Amy Chen, despite sharing a last name with Pacific Heartland's CEO, had no relation to him, but she brought an incredible attention to detail. Marcus Liu had a gift for financial modeling that rivaled my own. And Jennifer Park, whose brother apparently worked in Pinnacle's HR department, brought insights into agricultural lending that proved invaluable. "Your brother really works at Pinnacle?" I asked Jennifer during one late-night session. She nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable. "He does, and he told me something you should probably know. Marcus Winters has been telling people that you stole proprietary information when you left. He's threatening legal action." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. On what grounds? Everything I'm using is either public knowledge or analysis I developed independently. He's claiming the agricultural sector. Methodologies were developed during your marriage and, therefore, constitute marital property that you had no right to take to a competitor. I stared at her. That's insane. Those methodologies are in my head. They're not files I copied. They're how I think. I know, Jennifer said. My brother says the partners aren't taking it seriously, but Marcus is making a lot of noise. Just wanted you to be aware. Great. So now I had to worry about legal threats on top of everything else. But I couldn't let it distract me. The Cascade presentation was in 3 days, and it had to be perfect. The night before the presentation, I stayed late reviewing every detail. Victoria found me at 9 o'clock, still adjusting slides. Lena, go home. Get some sleep. You've done brilliant work. Don't second-guess yourself now. What if Morrison doesn't like it? I asked and heard the anxiety in my own voice. What if I'm wrong about the expansion timeline or the capital requirements? Or then you'll adjust. Victoria interrupted firmly. Alina, you need to let go of this idea that you have to be perfect. You're allowed to be excellent and still make occasional adjustments. That's called being human. Your ex-husband might have demanded perfection because he was afraid of being exposed. But I don't work that way. I hired you for your judgment, not for your ability to be flawless. Her words settled something inside me. She was right. I'd spent so many years terrified of making mistakes because Marcus's entire facade depended on everything I produced being beyond reproach. But that wasn't my burden anymore. Thank you, I said quietly. I needed to hear that. The next morning, standing in front of Gerald Morrison and his executive team, I felt that familiar flutter of nerves. But this time, when I looked down at the first slide with my name on it, Cascade Agricultural Holdings Expansion Strategy by Alina Winters, Chief Strategist, Redwood Capital Partners. The nerves transformed into something else. Confidence, ownership, pride. I presented for an hour, walking them through every aspect of the expansion strategy. Capital structure, risk mitigation, market analysis, technology integration, growth projections. And I didn't just present numbers. I showed them I understood their business, their values, their vision for sustainable agriculture. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then Morrison started clapping and his entire team joined in. Winters, he said, standing. That was exceptional. You've not only addressed every concern we had, you've identified opportunities we hadn't even considered. Cascade would be honored to work with Redwood Capital Partners. Consider us your client. The contract was signed within the week, and just as Morrison had predicted, Thomas Chen from Pacific Heartland reached out 2 days later requesting a similar presentation. The industry notices when major clients switch firms. Within days, the news was spreading through Seattle's financial community. Redwood Capital Partners had landed 2 of Pinnacle's biggest agricultural accounts. And the analyst behind it was Marcus Winters' ex-wife. The reactions were mixed. Some people saw it as justified comeuppance. Others whispered that it was vindictive. But increasingly, people were asking the same question. If Alina Winters was this good, how much of Marcus Winters' success had actually been hers all along? The answer, it turned out, was about to become very public. 3 weeks after landing the Pacific Heartland account, I got a call from Rebecca Chen, my old colleague at Pinnacle. Lena, you need to know something. The managing partners have launched an internal review of Marcus's division. They're going through all his past presentations and they're finding inconsistencies. Reports that cite data that doesn't exist. Projections that don't match the underlying models. And a lot of people are starting to realize that all the problems started right after you left. What does that mean? I asked. It means Marcus is being put on administrative leave pending the review. And Alina, they're going to want to talk to you. They're going to want to know how much of his work was actually yours. The call came 2 days later. Not from Pinnacle's partners, but from their legal team. They wanted to interview me as part of their internal investigation. They assured me I wasn't in any trouble. They just needed to understand the full scope of the division's work product. And who had been responsible for what? I consulted with Redwood's attorney, who advised me to cooperate fully but carefully. So I did. I sat in a conference room with two of Pinnacle's lawyers and walked them through 12 years of invisible labor. I showed them timestamps on files that proved I'd done the work. I provided emails where I'd explained complex analyses to Marcus in simple terms. I documented everything I could remember about my contributions. "Why didn't you ever ask for credit?" one of the lawyers asked. I thought about that question. "Because I loved him," I said finally. "And because I'd been taught that being smart wasn't enough. That you needed someone to present your ideas or they'd never be heard. I thought we were a team. I thought his success was our success." I was wrong. The investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, I tried to focus on my work at Redwood, on building my division, on establishing my own reputation. But it was hard not to watch the slow-motion collapse of DeFee's career, with a mixture of sadness and inevitability. When the results of the investigation were finally released, they were damning. Pinnacle's managing partners issued a statement announcing that Marcus Winters had been terminated for misrepresentation of work product and failure to properly credit contributions from team members. They stopped short of admitting fraud, but the implication was clear. Marcus had been exposed. The Seattle business press had a field day. Golden boys fall from grace. Investment analyst built career on wife's work. Pinnacle terminates partner after internal review. I didn't take any pleasure in it. Honestly, I just felt tired. This whole mess, this whole painful unraveling, it had all been so unnecessary. If Marcus had just respected me, credited me, treated me as an equal partner, none of this would have happened. We could have built something real together, but he hadn't. And now we were both living with the consequences. 6 months after that night at the charity gala, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. I'd moved into a beautiful condo in Capitol Hill with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. My division at Redwood was thriving, managing over $400 million in assets. And most importantly, I've learned to sleep through the night without the weight of someone else's expectations crushing my chest. Marcus, I heard through the inevitable social network of Seattle's business community, had left the city. Word was he'd moved to Phoenix to work for a small regional firm where nobody knew his history. Part of me hoped he'd find some kind of peace there. Most of me just felt relieved that I'd never have to. See him again? I was having coffee with Rebecca one Saturday morning when she told me something that made me pause. Jennifer Park from Pinnacle's HR called me yesterday, Rebecca said. Apparently, after the investigation, they went through old personnel files and found something interesting. You were supposed to have been promoted to senior analyst 5 years ago. There was a recommendation from one of the managing partners, but it never went through because Marcus blocked it. I stared at her. He blocked my promotion. He told HR that you preferred to work behind the scenes, that you had specifically requested to remain in a support role. He forged your signature on a declination letter. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. 5 years ago, I'd been working 80-hour weeks on the Riverside Healthcare merger. And I'd convinced myself that I didn't need a title or recognition because the work itself was enough. But apparently, Marcus had made that decision for me, had literally forged my name to keep me invisible. "Why are they telling you this now?" I asked, because they want to make it right. They're offering you a formal apology and back pay for the 5 years you should have been at the senior analyst level. It's a substantial amount, Alina, over $300,000. I didn't take Pinnacle's money, not because I didn't deserve it, but because accepting it felt like it would tie me back to that old life in some way. Instead, I told them to donate the full amount to a scholarship fund for women pursuing careers in finance. Let some other brilliant young woman have opportunities I'd had to fight for. But I did agree to one thing. The managing partners asked if I would speak at a firm-wide meeting about invisible labor and the importance of crediting contributions. It was the last thing I wanted to do, but Rebecca convinced me it mattered. There are probably dozens of people at Pinnacle right now doing what you did, she said. Working in the shadows, letting someone else take credit because they think that's how it has to be. You could change that. So I went back to Pinnacle one final time. Standing in their main conference room in front of 200 employees, I told my story. I told them about the years of silent work, about the slow erosion of self-worth that comes from never being acknowledged, about the moment I finally realized that love without respect is just another word for exploitation. I'm not telling you this to make anyone feel guilty, I concluded. I'm telling you because some of you are living this right now. You're brilliant and you're invisible, and you've convinced yourself that's acceptable. It's not. Your work deserves your name on it. Your contributions deserve recognition. And if you're in a relationship, professional or personal, where you can't have both love and respect, then you don't actually have either. The room was silent when I finished. Then someone in the back started clapping, and within seconds the entire room was on their feet. Afterward, at least a dozen people approached me privately. Junior analysts who'd been writing reports for their bosses. Administrative assistants who'd been solving problems without credit. One woman, probably in her 50s, thanked me with tears in her eyes. I've been doing this for 23 years, she said. I thought it was just how things worked. Thank you for saying it didn't have to be. That conversation stayed with me. Because the truth was, my story wasn't unique. It was just finally being told. Dr. Nathan Cross took me to dinner a week later, to celebrate the 6-month anniversary of what he jokingly called Operation Liberation. You've exceeded every expectation, he said, raising his wine glass. Redwood's investment division is already profitable. You've brought in 4 major clients. And you're being courted by 3 other firms who want to steal you away. I'm not going anywhere, I assured him. Victoria gave me a chance when I needed it most. I'm loyal to that. Good, he said. Because between you and me, she's planning to make you a partner. Full equity stake. You've earned it. I felt that familiar flutter of imposter syndrome try to surface. That voice that whispered I didn't really deserve this, that it was somehow too much. But I'd learned to recognize that voice now for what it was. The ghost of years spent being told my value was in being invisible. I have earned it, I said aloud, testing the words. They felt good. Nathan smiled. Yes, you have. And Alina, what you did, walking away from Marcus, starting over, reclaiming your career. That took real courage. I hope you know that. I've thought about that word courage for so long. I'd thought courage meant enduring, staying, sacrificing, but real courage I'd learned was in the leaving. In the moment you decide you're worth more than the crumbs you've been accepting. Thank you, I said, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. I didn't do anything special, Nathan replied. I just recognized brilliance when I saw it. The tragedy is how many brilliant people never get recognized because they're too busy making someone else shine. A year after the charity gala, I was invited back to the same event. Different circumstances this time. Redwood Capital Partners was one of the sponsors. I was attending as their representative, my name in the program, my face in the promotional materials. I almost didn't go. The Roosevelt Grand held too many painful memories. But Victoria convinced me. You need to close that circle, she said. You need to walk into that room as the person you've become, not the person you were. I went. I wore red this time, not midnight blue, a color that demanded to be seen. And when I walked into that ballroom, heads turned. People who'd watched Marcus humiliate me a year ago now approached me with respect, with congratulations, with business cards. The auction was different too. I bid on several items, and I won a weekend at a vineyard in Woodinville. When I raised my paddle, I felt none of the old anxiety about taking up space. I'd earned the right to be here. I'd earned the right to be seen. Toward the end of the evening, I stepped outside for some air. The October night was clear and cool, and Seattle's lights spread out below the hotel like a field of stars. Quite a difference from last year. I turned to find Nathan Cross beside me, hands in his pockets, looking out at the view. It's quite a difference, I agreed. Any regrets? He asked. I thought about it honestly. Did I regret the years with Marcus? The time I'd lost? The dreams I deferred? No, I said finally. I wish it had happened differently. I wish I'd been brave enough to leave sooner. But those years taught me what I didn't want. And sometimes that's just as valuable as knowing what you do want. Nathan nodded. You know, when you sent me your portfolio a year ago, I saw the talent immediately. But I wasn't sure if you had the fire to actually claim it. A lot of people are brilliant. Not everyone has the courage to own their brilliance. I didn't think I did, I admitted. The night of the auction when Marcus sold me for that dollar, I wanted to disappear. To sink into the floor? But then you bid, and something changed. It was like you were saying I was worth something. That I mattered. You always mattered, Alina. You just needed someone to say it out loud so you could finally hear it. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city breathe below us. What's next for you? Nathan asked. I smiled. Redwood's opening a new office in San Francisco. Victoria wants me to head it up. Build another investment division from scratch. You going to do it? Yes, I said without hesitation. A year ago, that would have terrified me. Now, I'm excited. I know what I'm capable of. And I'm done hiding it. Nathan extended his hand. Then congratulations, Alina Winters, on your past success and your future triumphs. You've earned every single one. I shook his hand, and in that moment, I felt the final piece of my old life release its hold on me. I wasn't Marcus Winters' wife anymore. I wasn't anyone's ghost or shadow or invisible support system. Some people will tell you that revenge is hollow, that it doesn't heal the wounds or fill the empty spaces. And they're right. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation, about taking back the parts of myself I'd surrendered in the name of love, about learning that sacrifice without reciprocity isn't noble. It's just slow self-destruction. If you're reading this and you see yourself in my story, please hear me. Your brilliance deserves to be acknowledged. Your work deserves your name on it. And you deserve to be valued not just for what you can do for someone else, but for who you are. Walk into the light. Claim your worth. And never, ever let anyone auction off your dignity for $1.